So welcome to this video where we're going to be doing all the 3D tracking in pftrack. Before we start, let me just quickly explain to you guys what pftrack is and what you can do with it. So basically, if I just play through this clip quickly here on this timeline, if you press spacebar, this will play. So as you can see, this is a handheld shot, and basically using pftrack you can create a virtual camera from the shot, and then you can take that virtual camera into your 3D program like 3ds Max, and you can create some CG objects inside this scene so that it's actually sitting on the floor, and it can actually interact with other objects in your scene, and you can cast shadows on the walls or on the floor. And that's how they basically do most of the VFX in Hollywood. So yeah, let's get started. So before we can actually track the scene, we need to add some contrast to this image. As you can see, it was shot on a very flat picture profile, so it's not really that contrasty. So first of all, what we're going to do, we're going to right click on this node here at the top, and we're going to create a image manipulation node. And on this node we can actually manipulate the image, so we can change the colors or create a S-curve or whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to enable curves right here at the bottom. So just tick curves, and then we're going to create a S-curve just to create a bit of contrast. So just click with your mouse once and then drag it down, and then click with your mouse again and then drag it up. So just something like that to create a bit of contrast, and then that will be easier to track. Okay, let's just load our footage into cache. So what you can do on the timeline, just press spacebar and you'll see that it will actually load everything into memory. Okay, next up we're going to create a user track node. So what you need to do is right click on your image manipulation node, and then you're going to click on user track. And this is basically a manual track where we're going to create the tracking points, and we're going to select how many tracking points we want, etc. So let's create our first tracker. So make sure you're on user track by double clicking on it, and then here at the bottom we're going to click on create, and then we're going to look for a point in our scene that we want to track. So let's try, you can just click and drag around to select your point. So let's try this corner right there. So here at the bottom you can see a zoomed in version of that tracker, and you can also resize the tracker by dragging these points around. So the center is your actual tracking point, and the rectangle around that will be the search area. Okay, before we start tracking, let's just set some parameters. So first of all, by deformation, we're going to set that to rotate, and we're also going to tick scale, and we're also going to tick skew. And one more thing that we want to do is we want to set this illumination on. So with illumination ticked, it will actually just look at lighting changes in your scene, so it will really help you with your track. And then we want to set these settings as default, so we don't have to set this for every single track we create. So just click on set default here at the bottom, and then you click on yes to confirm that. So as you can see, our play is not really at the beginning of our sequence, so that's fine. You can actually start tracking in the middle, so you can track forward and then you can track backwards, or you can actually start at the beginning. It doesn't really matter. So for this one, we're going to start by tracking backwards. So here at the bottom is your tracking controls, and you can either track one frame at a time, or you can track backwards or forwards all frames. So we're going to start with this one, track backwards, and just click on that and you'll see it will track backwards. And here in this little window you can just monitor your track. Okay, there we go, that's looking pretty good. And let's go back to where we started, and then we're going to do a track forward. Okay, so that looks like a good track. So if you just scrub through it, you'll see that that cursor will actually stay on that point. And what you want to try and do is you want to try and track points closer to the camera, and you want to try and track points further from the camera, and never track something that actually moves around. So you don't want to track one of these trees or anything that's going to move around in your scene. Stay away from them. So we only want to track static points. So let's track something a little bit closer to the camera. So let's try and track this little dot right there. So I'm going to click on create again, and then I'm just going to drag this around, and here at the bottom you can actually fine tune it. So you can click and drag around just to set your position perfectly, something like that. And you can also zoom in here at the top. If you hold in your mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out, and then if you hold in your right mouse button, you can pan around. Another cool trick is if you click on this center view here at the bottom, it will actually center your tracker in this view, and it actually helps a bit when you're doing your tracking to see the tracker staying in the center of this view. So again, we're not at the beginning of our clip, so we're going to start here and we're going to track backwards. So let's do that now. And then just keep an eye here on this monitor at the bottom, and if it goes off you can just press escape and then I'll show you how to correct that. Okay, that's a good track, so let's go back to our starting position and let's track forward. Okay, so we're going to try and get about 10 user tracks before we go on to the next node. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm just going to zoom out here a bit and just drag this to the center. So now we've got 2 tracking points, and also remember to disable the center view here at the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to create a tracking point right here on this corner of this roof. So I'm going to click on create and I'm going to select that point. And for this one, I'm just going to make this tracking point a little bit smaller. And you can actually make the search area smaller as well. And for this, we're actually going to start at the beginning of our clip, which is fine. And then I'm going to click on track forward. You can click on center view again to just center that tracking marker. Cool, that's looking like a good track. So let's just zoom out here and let's disable the center view. So let's look for another point to track. Okay, so I'm going to track this little dot on this wall. So I'm going to click on create, click on that, just make the tracking point a little bit smaller, search area smaller as well, and let's track forward. Cool, that looks like a good track again. So I'm going to show you quickly what will happen if your tracking area actually goes outside of your frame. So just as a quick test, you see the shadow here at the bottom. I'm going to set a new tracking marker to that position, and I'm going to just zoom in there a bit so that you can see what's going to happen here. So I'm going to track forward, and you'll see that the shadow area will actually go outside of the frame very soon. So let's just give it a few seconds. There we go. So it will actually stop your track. So it will tell you, okay, it can't find that tracking point and it's going to stop it. So that's fine. But what you need to do is you need to tell pftrack that this is the end of your track for that specific tracking marker. So what we're going to do right here at the bottom, you've got hide and then also remove key. And you've got a minus to remove everything before the playhead, and you've got a plus to remove everything after the playhead, and the same with the hide, the H minus for before and the H plus for after. So you want to hide and also delete or remove all these data on this side of this playhead. So just stand on that playhead at the position where that marker went out of the screen, and then we're first going to click on the R plus because we want to remove everything after that playhead. Confirm that by clicking again, and then we also want to hide and confirm that side as well, and you'll see that will just change back to a gray color, and that tracker will actually disappear after that point. So that's actually fine to do that, but for now I'm going to delete this tracker just to make 100% sure that we're only creating very accurate user tracks. So to delete that tracker, we're going to just click on it, and then here on the side click on delete, and then just click again to confirm. Okay, let's find something else to track. So I'm going to track this side as well. So I'm going to click on create a tracking point right there. Just make that a bit smaller, make that smaller as well. And then we're going to click on track forward. Okay, we also need to track back. So let's just go back to the starting position, click on track back and let that run through. Okay, so that was tracker number 5. We need to create at least another 5 user tracks. Okay, so let's zoom into this point on the roof right there. And I'm going to click create. Let's create a tracking point right there. Let's just make that a bit smaller. Let's make that smaller as well. And let's track forward. Okay, that looks like a cool track. So let's just zoom out again. Let's disable center view. And let's see what else we can track here. Maybe let's track this pole right here. So I'm going to go to the first frame and I'm going to click on create. Let's create a box around that area. Let's just make the search area smaller as well, something like that, and let's track forward. Okay, that's looking good. Let's just quickly scrub through here. Yeah, it's looking good. Let's zoom out and let's disable this center view. Okay, we need to create a few more, so let's just zoom in here and see where we can create more tracking markers. So let's maybe create one on this corner of the shadow. So I'm going to click on create. Let's create one right there. Let's just make it a bit smaller, and this one as well, something like that, and let's track forward. Cool, that's looking good. Let's create a few more. Okay, maybe let's create one on this corner of the shadow as well. So create right there, make this a bit smaller, something like that. And because we're right at the end, we're going to track backwards. Okay, cool. Let's create another one. So let's just create one on this little dot right there. So create right there. Let's make this search a little bit smaller, that as well, and track forward. Okay, I'm sure you get the picture by now, but it's really important that you do a really good job with your user tracks. So let's just see what else we can track. Okay, maybe let's track this dot right there. So create a little right there, make it a bit smaller, this one as well, and track forward. Okay, let's create one more user track. So let's see what we can do here. Let's create one on this side. So maybe this small little bush going on here. So let's just click on that, something like that, and let's track forward. Cool, so that should be enough user track points. So next up, we want to create an auto track node that will actually create points automatically. But the reason that we use the user track first is that these points that we created now will be first looked at by pftrack, and they will be interpreted, and they're much more important than the auto tracks. So always try and get your user tracks as accurate or as perfect as possible before moving on to the auto track. Okay, so to create that new node on your user track node here in the tree view, you're going to right click, and then we're going to click on auto track, and then double click on auto track to open the properties. Okay, so let's just go through these settings quickly. So first of all, the candidate number, that's the amount of trackers that we want. So set that to 150. Target number, that's the amount of good tracks that you want. So let's put that on 60. And then we're going to change the failure threshold to 0.900, which is basically 90%. And then you can leave your search mode on better speed. Sometimes I put this on better accuracy, but for now you can just leave it on better speed. And deformation, very importantly, make sure that you tick rotate, scale, and skew. And also make sure that you tick this illumination here at the bottom for those lighting changes. And then make sure you're on the first frame, and then click on auto track here on the right hand side to start your auto track. I will just fast forward through this, so it might take a few minutes, but yeah, not too long. Let's see what happens. Okay, so our auto track has completed, and if you scrub through, you'll see all these little dots and these yellow lines going behind them. So what we need to do now is we need to clean up this auto track. And remember that I told you not to track any moving objects. Well, the auto track might have tracked some of the trees in the background, so we need to get rid of those bad trackers. So a little tip, what you can do is here on the side, you'll see a D for darken, and that will actually just darken your footage a bit so you can see all the tracking markers a little bit better. And if you scrub through here, you'll see at the back we've got some tracking markers right in those moving trees, also here at the top. So the best way to get rid of those is to click on this marquee button here on the right hand side, and if you see those, we're just going to click and drag a box around them, and then on your keyboard press delete, and then just delete again to confirm. So just do that for all these tracking points that you see in the trees. So I'm going to scrub through again. I'm just going to look at this side first, and I'm going to see if we have any tracking points in that area, and that's actually looking right. So we've got this little one here. I'm going to delete it. Just double tap your delete button. Maybe this one is a bit risky here on the side of that bit of grass here, so I'm going to delete that. Also, you can just look at some of these tracking points, and if you see any of those that's not really sticking to their location, then delete them as well. So anything that's not really accurate. I'm a bit worried about these two as well in the grass, so I'm going to delete them. Let's just quickly scrub through here a few times. Cool, so once you're happy with your auto track, we're going to create a solve camera node to actually calculate all these trackers from our user track and also the auto track, and then that's going to work out the camera move, and it's going to create a camera for us. So let's go ahead and right click on auto track, and we're going to create a camera solver node. So in the camera solver properties, there are a few things that we can change, nothing too hectic. So what we can do is these translation and rotation, we can actually set some smoothing to this. So basically, if you are 100% sure that all your tracks are perfectly 100% accurate, you can leave this on no smooth, and it will actually use the tracking data in your scene to create your camera movement. But usually you'll have a few trackers that might be off by a few pixels, and then I will set this to a low smooth, both on your translation, the movement, and also the rotation of the camera. So next step to solve the camera is to click on solve all here right at the bottom, and this will actually go into all these tracking points and create a camera for you. Okay, once that's done, you can scrub through your scene and let's see what's happening. So you'll see all these little dots moving around, and currently this grid is not really sitting on the floor. So you can see these dots, they actually sliding over or across this grid. Doesn't look too good. So what we can do is we can set the origin of this grid. So what you can do is just click on any of these little dots. So I'm going to click on that one, and I'm going to click on set origin. And that's going to set my grid origin to that point, and it's going to make sure that it's actually on the floor. So let's just scrub through that, and you can see that's looking a lot better. So let's just play through that by hitting spacebar, and let's just see if that looks alright. Cool, that looks like a really solid track. In the next video, we're going to look at some other nodes just to orient our scene and also to test our track by using some test objects. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.